Good morning, good evening, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Final Sector podcast.
Woo.
It's a break between race weekends, which means we're going to chat all things news about F1 with what's going on, look a bit at what happened in the past, look into the future. I'm Kyle, of course, here with Michael.
Hello.
And I thought we would start it off with probably right where the Monaco Grand Prix kind of ended, let's say,
Sure.
which was... Monaco Grand Prix ended, we saw everyone celebrating. Checo goes up to Christian Horner and says, we signed a bit early then. And everyone went, eh? So then it came out pretty soon after that, yes, they have re-signed Checo for another year. Some people called it the worst
2 years,
kept
wasn't
secret.
it? I think it was 2 years.
Was it 2 years? The wording's confused. So they have announced that he is extended, not just 1 year, but actually a 2-year extension.
Mm-hmm.
Some people called it the... as I say, quote unquote, worst kept secret of F1, but I still think that, I mean, given how he came into the start of this year, there was a lot of pressure on Checo to kind of at the pace, and there's still a lot of pressure coming from, people wanting Gasly to go up there, who's been performing quite well. So, I mean, from my side as a fan, and we won't touch on it that much, but from a predictions perspective, I might admit that I'm quite happy with this.
Yes,
this
that was one thing I had in the back of my mind when it happened. I'm like, this is not going to look good for me at the end of the year when we go look at predictions.
Yeah, indeed. But it's still a pretty big statement to do it pretty early. I mean, I guess, again, it's kind of perfect that on the race weekend where he wins, they kind of announce it.
Yeah.
Whether they were planning to announce it this early or not, who knows? Some people were arguing they should have just used that clip of him speaking to Horner as the announcement clip, because why not, right?
Yeah.
But yes, they've extended that. So obviously they're looking at Checo and Max for the long term. Interesting that also coming out of that, Horner's said, hey, look, both these drivers are still in the championship. They can still fight together.
Yep.
Let's be real. Max is still 100% probably the favorite. Yes, Checo's still been there to pick up the pieces, but Monaco really was a bit of kind of a crap shot, let's say, and he just did well, leading up to the weekend to get to the point where he was ahead of Max and therefore kind of locked out for the win. But I still... You'd be hard to say, oh, now they're equal rivals going forward. I've seen some discussions and that saying, oh, could he get up there? And I'm kind of like, no, unless Max gets some, bog-ass bad luck, then I don't think he's going to be at the top. But certainly this is a big statement for Red Bull and, saying, hey, we're happy with these two for the time being. And it does have other ramifications, as we've said. So what's your take on it? How are you feeling about it? Good decision? Bad decision?
I think it's the right decision, because I think a lot of news outlets are reporting, there's always been this question mark around that Red Bull second seat, obviously with Gasly and Albon, Kvyat, all these drivers coming in. They're trying to find someone who, they're the Ricciardo that left, they've been trying to fill that seat. It was the curse of that, the Red Bull second seat, that
the Red Bull number 2.
Yeah, exactly. And no one could get even anywhere close to Max's pace. They needed someone that, if they were fighting with Mercedes or if they're fighting with Ferrari, they need a second driver that can, even if they're not winning, they're picking up, the good haul of points, or they can play into strategy or things like that. And they haven't had that since Ricciardo. And they now have that in Perez, particularly with these. I think this new car for 2022, it does seem to suit him a lot better, which I think helps quite a lot. But yeah, I mean, given his performances last year, obviously with... I'll bring up Abu Dhabi, please no conflict, but the Abu Dhabi last year, with how he defended, in that race it just shows how good he can be. And then, the start to this year that he has, where he's third in the championship, he's only 15 points off Leclerc at the moment. The win in Monaco, obviously, a little bit of luck, granted, with how Ferrari did their strategies and how both Ferrari drivers got stuck behind both Williams drivers.
Yes, yep.
So, a little bit of luck there, but the fact that he could still, he and the team can take that race win, particularly at somewhere like Monaco, is awesome for him. I think it's the right decision. It does, like you say, it raises a few questions, particularly for drivers from AlphaTauri, like your Gaslys and Tsunodas, who, for the longest time it's been the Toro Rosso or the AlphaTauri, that's the B team, and they have these junior drivers in there to eventually make it to the Red Bull team. Yeah. And with Max, he obviously has that super long contract till, I think it's 2028 or something. He's been committed to Red Bull, and if they keep performing,
he's essentially committed for life, isn't he? Let's be
more
real.
or less, yeah. And if they keep performing, he's not going to leave.
No.
Perez now till the end of 2024, so that's another 2 years. I could see Tsunoda, if he keeps performing, staying another 2 years and then seeing where to go from there. Gasly, I think his time is now. He needs to get out of that Red Bull Academy.
Yes.
He needs out. Probably next year, I would say. I can't see him staying one more year in that Red Bull program. So, I don't know. It raises even more questions with, Red Bull Junior Academy has so many drivers. You've got your Vips and your Lawsons coming through.
Yeah.
What kind of message does that send to those guys? That, you could stay with AlphaTauri, but we could just stay with, these two drivers for as long as we want. We might not even look at promoting our junior drivers anymore. So could there be a knock-on effect there where they lose some of their junior drivers to different academies or different teams who are willing to take them? So I think it has positives and negatives, this Perez deal. But I think while they're both performing at a high level, and while they're pretty comfortably ahead in the championship, Red Bull, and they're both driving well, I think it makes sense to give Perez at least a secure 2 years, rather than we saw what happened with someone like Bottas when he was on the year-to-year deal. I think Perez is a little bit better, maybe a little stronger mentally with that kind of thing, but
just different stage in his career too.
Yeah, that's it. But we've seen what can happen with drivers when they're on that year-to-year contract and expected to perform at the highest levels. So yeah, I think definitely positives and negatives, but I think for right now it's probably the right decision. So
yeah. Again, as you say, it's almost a thing where it's good to get it done so early, because then, if this championship fight this year is going to be really tight, well, then he doesn't have to even worry about it in the back of his mind, right?
Exactly,
Having to be doing contract talks every week to try and secure next year, knowing this is his last year racing. And so to get that out of the way very, very early is smart. And as you say, it must be a good bit of a boost for him to know that it's not just the 1 year and then he'll have to start dredging it up at the end of this year, start of next year.
Definitely.
That 2 year extension. I guess it is just the biggest statement, I think. I guess towards Yuki, it wouldn't really be a statement, because where he's at, he's not like the old traditional Red Bull path where you jump in for 1 or 2 years, kill it, and then you get your promotion, right? He's more so been doing fine enough, but it's not like there's a hot-headed young junior that's banging at the door. They need to get him out of there, so he's kind of just doing whatever. I think it is really just a big statement to Gasly, from what we've always said, which is that although Red Bull agree he has the pace and that, there's just his time they left a lot of, I don't want to say like battle scars or anything or bad taste, but there's obvious reasons why they really, really don't want to bring him in, right? And I guess, again, because they don't have so many of those top-tier juniors banging at the door, they can kind of just stay steady for once rather than, traditional Red Bull of churning. So,
I mean, also Gasly and Tsunoda seem to have a pretty good relationship at AlphaTauri. And,
yes.
But yeah, and to be fair, Gasly, he hasn't had. My predictions based on Gasly going to Red Bull for next year was based on the fact that Gasly was going to come out this year and absolutely kill it.
He was still going to continue rising and kill it.
Yeah, which he kind of hasn't done. That AlphaTauri, I think, there's a lot of limitations in the car, but he hasn't.
And you wouldn't
really
say he's been doing bad, but he hasn't been, smashing headlines and everyone's going, wow, this is a massive call because, And again, I guess the other call you could maybe make, as you mentioned, is maybe an Albon, but Albon's, again, in a different stage in his career, and more so I think he's happy where he is, and he wouldn't be seeing this going, damn it, guess I better just stop trying because that was my goal for next year.
Exactly. Yeah, I think he's just happy to be back in F1 after
for sure
almost being completely ousted. So
yeah, for sure, getting a second life.
Yeah, I think Albon's young enough that he can again wait out a couple of years, whether or not he wants to try and build that Williams back up, or if he's looking at maybe even moving somewhere else.
To anywhere else, right?
Getting a seat, staying in the sport, and then seeing what happens with the Red Bull seat.
Exactly.
There is that potential, but yeah, I do think that Red Bull kind of didn't. I mean, they obviously had the choice, but I think they were, with the way Perez has been performing, they were kind of forced into. They have to sign him. Like they can't not with how well he's been doing.
And they do know, because him being a bit of a different Red Bull driver, and that he's an experienced old head and he knows his position again. They kind of threw him a lifeline when he was out of a drive.
Yep.
Although we heard a little bit in Spain that he was a little bit miffy about, being to move over and that, he still is like any other driver they throw in there is going to be less likely to, want to be malleable and forced into a kind of a second driver support act per se. So I'm guessing as long as he knows he's given the chance to win when he gets shown it, which he kind of was at Monaco, right?
Yeah.
Then I think from that perspective, he's going to be fine. You suspect they're going to try to treat him well, and they would have talked through this quite a lot, obviously, if they signed him and they said, but by the way, you've got to jump out the way every time Max is behind you. Then maybe he'd gone a bit, well, maybe I don't want this. So
exactly, yeah.
I guess we'll stay on the driver chat because there's a few to talk about. The other one, which if you follow lots of F1 YouTubers, you probably would have seen a lot of videos on this week, more than I've probably ever seen, is on one Mr. Australian, Daniel Ricciardo.
Mr.
Everyone
Australian.
essentially.
I love
Mr. Australian.
That's what he's known as now.
From Perth.
From Perth.
Talking about Mr. Ricciardo and saying, at this point, he's doing nothing to get his extension beyond 2023, but moreover that, is his contract going to get cut short. McLaren, especially in the last 2 races, started to be very vocal, basically saying, we would understood the reasons why it took him to get up to speed and everything, and I think they really expected him this year to come out guns blazing. They're still notably paying him like a ridiculous amount of money, which I've always known he's gotten a lot of money.
Yeah, he was on. McLaren did a lot of hard work. Obviously, I think McLaren wanted Ricciardo initially before he went to Renault, I believe.
Yes,
but because I think he was more attracted to that Renault because it was the better car.
He saw them more on an upward trajectory, and then he jumped over. I know there was some clauses and payouts, and as we know from Renault, they were apparently paying. I think it was like the second most paid driver, any driver on the grid behind Hamilton or something ridiculous.
It just goes to show how much teams wanted Ricciardo at that time, like how good a driver he can be.
And he was performing at Renault. He got, two podiums? I know he got the first one at Germany.
I think he got two.
I think he got 2 podiums, right? Yeah. And yes, he did have that win in Monza, but then I feel like that was more just right place, right time. Like when you think about Gasly's win at Monza again, you think that yes, he was right place, right time, but at least Gasly's done other things since then. Well, Ricciardo, that was more, not to the degree of like a Maldonado moment, but similar, right? Like Maldonado had that race, which was amazing, and then that was really it, So
I get what
on
you
the
mean.
same-ish vein, especially in this area of his career. But yeah, I guess a lot of the pressure, it's less coming. It's not really juniors, but McLaren do have other drivers in their fold that they're very keen to get involved. They have Lando, who's secured almost as much as Leclerc or Max is to their own teams. They see him as the future. He's performing outstandingly well, despite the fact that we saw where that car started and it was an absolute boat, and yet he's they're very quickly moved forward. And you've seen Lando jump up to that, but then Daniel's still lagging behind, and in Spain to see Lando, who had tonsillitis, being able to fight and keep his position, and Ricciardo, who was fine, just going backwards and afterwards having no answers, and he was almost just going, we'll try figure out why. Like, he was almost hoping the mechanics could come up with an excuse for him because he couldn't understand it.
Yeah.
It's like, oh boy. So no wonder they're kind of going, hey buddy, not only is this bad for the future, but look, we might just cut this short because I alluded to before, they've got even a few drivers in the IndyCar program and such, which have been linked to potentially with Andretti, but they do race for McLaren over on their side too. And they have been doing some testing that behind the scenes, and I think Zach Brown's very much going, look, we have no problem with kind of cutting this short to play around a bit, considering we've got one solid driver here and we need to ensure our future. So they're not just want to go, oh, we'll just we'll just play out 2023, see how it goes. They're very much like, no, this could be another step forward for us. We need to make sure we've got 2 bloody fantastic drivers, and they just can't get that out of Ricciardo at the moment. So,
so if you haven't seen, Zach Brown was the one. He's kind of sparked all these rumors with the comments that he made saying that he hasn't lived up to expectations, and that in that same conversation, he admitted there were break clauses in his contract, in Ricciardo's contract, that means the contract could end before the end of 2023.
Correct.
From what I was reading, we don't know the ins and outs of the contract. Obviously, I don't think we ever will. But the clauses may have been hinted at the fact that only Ricciardo can enact upon the break contract early. I can't remember who I was watching or listening to. It might have even been that BBC podcast that you showed me. Where they were talking about how initially, because McLaren wanted Ricciardo so much, there's a good chance that the initial contract was heavily in Ricciardo's favor in terms of like brake clause stuff. So even if McLaren do want to get rid of Ricciardo because he's not performing, maybe it's not really that option in the contract. Maybe it's Ricciardo that has to be like, okay, I have to choose to leave rather than McLaren deciding to kick him out. So it's hard to know without actually knowing the contract, but
yes.
Obviously I think it stands to reason that McLaren, they've spent so much money and invested already nearly a year and a half in Daniel. They want to make it work, but it's safe to say that time's sort of running out for him. He needs to sort of perform, particularly with McLaren. I think they're fourth in the championship right now, but it's very, very, very close behind them, particularly with like Alfa Romeo and Alpine. And both of those, like Alfa Romeo is basically being carried by Bottas. Zhou's been either a little off the pace or a little unlucky in some races. And Alfa Romeo sort of struggle with their reliability, but if they can have both drivers up there, there's a very good chance that McLaren could get dropped by Alfa. We've got Alpine again. We've got Ocon who's scoring points, Alonso who is super fast,
should be
very
scoring
unlucky,
points,
should be getting a lot more. You see, they basically all three teams have effectively one driver scoring the bulk of the points for them. So if one of those three teams can get both drivers scoring the points for them quicker than the other team, then their chances of sort of romping ahead of the rest of the midfield, it seems they need that. I think they need Daniel to sort of start scoring some points, start getting in the mix a lot more often to make sure they stay fourth in the championship. I think that's important for them to stay at the top of that midfield. So,
because on that point as well, you'd almost argue that more so for Alpine's side, as you say, it's more of like a mechanical kind of thing they need to work out. It's not necessarily a skill thing. And even on Zhou's side, you wouldn't say he's at Bottas's level, but you'd still say he's at a level that compared to the gap between... Yeah, and especially compared to the gap between Norris and Ricciardo, it's harder to explain that, because you can't just say to Ricciardo, oh, he's a rookie, he's in his first year, he's getting unlucky, he's not getting that much track time, which, as we said before, Zhou, to his credit, has had some rotten luck when he's trying to get used to F1, you know what I mean? And regarding that, he's I think the first time I've only ever heard Zhou get angry over the radio, I think was over the radio at Monaco, because he got stuffed over at quali, and he was pissed about that, understandably. Again, that wasn't really his fault. He was thrown out the last minute and he couldn't make it around. So yeah, they'll certainly be looking at that. And when we talk about upward trajectory and how the teams want to get up there, and really McLaren, has kind of said that, we're the fourth best team, and or thereabouts, right, on average, and you still kind of see them that top-ish of the midfield. And yet, as we say, with this reset and things are closing up, and as the year progresses, you get less, excuses from the car, and you fine-tune your reliability, and then...
And it's down to the driver just to get
And really at Spain, I think that was when we really saw that, when everyone was kind of like on a level playing field, and he just, so interesting. We'll certainly, well, I guess certainly doesn't help him that now he knows the pressure's on in the public eye and he's getting asked constantly about it, so then it's all he can think about, and then...
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess the other question that I had, which you sort of alluded to, is like, if, let's say hypothetically they do find, or like either Daniel leaves or they find a way to break the contract and they need a driver for next year. Who are the legitimate options, do you think? Obviously, you said you've got the IndyCar drivers, which we'll say Patricio O'Ward, who I think just signed a new IndyCar deal for a few years anyway, but I'm sure there'd be ways around breaking that to get to Formula One.
Yes, especially because it's managed by basically Zach Brown.
Yeah, exactly. He'd find something. Then you've obviously got your Colton Herta, who's been tipped for Formula One. Being the big American driver to come to Formula One, he's also an option. Is he getting a practice session with McLaren?
I think yes. So I think he will be. I don't know if it's confirmed or suspected he'll be the nominated driver to get the 2 mandatory practice sessions.
Yes.
Because, go
on. Well, I mean, there was those 2 drivers, but I'm just wondering if there was someone else. We could talk about like silly season stuff, sort of the mid-year break that we have, but I kind of want to get into it a little bit, because is there anyone from maybe the F1 field, like currently in F1, that could potentially take that seat? Because I've got a couple of ideas.
Yeah, so this kind of leads into another question I was going to raise, which is the point that if we look at, I saw a chart post the other day of the drivers that have signed for 2023, because again, even though it's only the start of the year, still essentially in F1 terms, we're still getting into that contract talk for next year, right?
Yep.
And at the moment, we have neither AlphaTauri driver signed or Aston Martin driver or Williams driver. So the first thing I guess you look at is saying, well, assuming, okay, so if they pull the plug mid-season, you see it unlikely that someone from another team is going to jump over unless they do like a trade. But then, given the terms of getting rid of Ricciardo, I don't know if a trade is going to be favorable or if he even wants to be traded further down the field, right? So assuming this is like an end-of-year thing, they sign it out, but then they kick him off early, I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, the first guy you look at potentially is a Gasly move to McLaren, right?
That's he was my other option.
I mean, we had him for years saying that he might move to Alpine, and I guess it's kind of they're two fish in the same kettle per se. So
well, I don't know. I mean, if Gasly is he's obviously going to be looking for a way out. I just can't see him in that AlphaTauri another year. So I think
because he knows then if he's staying there, he'll be that's like he wants to do like a 2-3 year contract. And that'll be the next phase, right?
Yeah,
he has to decide if he's gonna jump somewhere else or whether he does just live his career out there or just assess what's out there.
yeah, 100%. So you got someone like a Gasly. The other, and this is sort of a bit of an out there one, but I've got potentially Piastri in that seat.
Yes.
Given Alonso has basically come out and said that he sees no reason he won't be here next year, and with Ocon already on contract, it's hard to see. It's getting harder and harder to see Piastri in that Alpine for next year.
Yes.
And I don't know. I feel like we have to see Piastri somewhere next year, or he's gonna fuck off and do something else. And they lose quite possibly one of the most talented juniors to come through. So maybe that's biased, but I mean, he's obviously got pace.
No, you got a point. Yeah, I think
he's very strong.
You made a note as well to say that apparently around the British Grand Prix, apparently Alpine are going to allegedly announce something around that. So obviously they'll be talking about it, and you would assume that Piastri, well, given he's probably got a fair bit of free time, would also be, having some chattering around in the back end. And we know that teams have approached him and such. So he's keeping a relationship there with a few guys, totally understandably. So I guess if you really want to go outside, you could look at someone like a I was going to say Van Dorn. That's not the driver I was thinking of. No offense to Van Dorn, but yes, there you go. His teammate in
I know who you were talking
Formula
about.
E. Yeah.
Sorry, Stoffel. You're out for good.
Yes. Again, maybe Van Dorn at an outside chance of someone like Williams, but he basically burnt his bridges at McLaren, didn't he? So unless we're talking about there's no drivers in the fold, but there's a lot of drivers in the queue ahead of him.
Stoffel, see what you could have. You see what you could have had if you just played ball. You could have had a chance, but no. Anyway,
they should bring back Mr. Indy 500 winner Marcus Ericsson. He's on fire, right? Give him his second chance.
Yeah.
We've seen what returning players can do in Alonso recently and Albon. So there you go.
Yeah. Bring him back.
That's your shadow pick.
Is this the new meta? We're just bringing back drivers that have been, that have driven in like lower class teams that maybe haven't performed. Just bring them back once they start performing in other series and.
They'll bring back Sato as well to be his teammate.
Marino Sato.
We've got it. Marino, no. Takuma Sato.
Oh, that's Sato. Yeah, okay.
Yes. Yeah. So again, they have the thing is they have options, and while as long as they have a Lando, which is smashing out the park, which they are, it's not like they're desperate to kind of get someone to then outperform Lando, right? They can, they say, well, anyone that does better than Ricciardo, which at this point, unfortunately to say, might not be that difficult.
I think for Daniel in particular, I think it's kind of a good thing that maybe McLaren aren't performing as well as they should be, because if they were sort of up in that top three sort of area,
still smashing podiums out
if they were doing that and Daniel was performing the same he is relative to Lando, then maybe there's more of a like, okay, we need someone who can consistently get us points right now because we're fighting for wins, we're fighting for podiums, or maybe fighting for championships, which is obviously what they want to do. I think it probably benefits him, probably gives him a little bit more breathing room, a little bit more time the fact that they are outside that sort of area of getting consistent podiums or wins or anything.
Yep.
So again, we'll have to see. I don't know. He needs to start performing soon. I think we'll probably have a similar sort of discussion come mid-season, see if he's improved. And
I feel like almost every chat we have of this format will be a case of, let's do the 2-minute check-in with Daniel Ricciardo.
Yeah. How's Daniel doing? He's still shit?
Yeah.
We'll check back in a couple of races. Yeah.
We'll find a name for the show and we'll make a jingle or something. We'll milk it while it's apparently hot on YouTube with everyone talking about it. That's how you get views, right?
That's it. Yeah. Yep.
Don't steal our idea.
Put it in the shorts category.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, I was gonna talk again. I said a bit about how we do have 3 teams where no other drivers are signed. So really quickly, I was gonna get your quick opinions because I want to. Yuki Tsunoda, do you think he's gonna get another year?
Yeah, I think he'll get another year.
All right. How about Sebastian Vettel?
That's a loaded one. That's a loaded one, man.
He started down in the bog, but then hey, Q3 in Monaco. Hello.
Yeah. I think if Aston can get a hold of whatever problems that they've been having and start getting a car that can maybe consistently get him into the top 10s, then maybe. But if they're still sitting towards the back by the end of the year, I could genuinely see Vettel. I could see Vettel leaving F1.
That's what I was going to raise. I was going to say if they just say, if we know he's not performing, they say, hey, buddy, it's been great, but we want to get someone new in. Okay, we can kind of get that. But I was going to say if he does perform well, but the car is still 7, 8, 9 in the championship, what's the likelihood but I think we discussed this at the start of the year with our predictions, likelihood that he might say, hey, look, this has been fun, but I'm not here to troll around at the back like a Raikkonen, so I'm gonna tip my
I don't know.
I want to be more like a Bottas, right?
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. It's real tough. I think he's in a real tough position. He's sort of getting more to the end of his career. He's obviously super invested in this whole sustainability things and the environment and all that. So he has other interests outside Formula One. He's obviously talked about how there's that worry in his mind, or that like dichotomy in his mind, where it's like I love the Formula One racing, but obviously I know how much how unsustainable it is at the moment in terms of the environment. So that sort of conflict that he has, I think possibly could play a part, especially if he's not finding that same excitement, where he can't drive the car the way he wants to. It's not giving him the performances he wants, and I think if that's something that could play a really big factor. I think so. It's a hard one to say for Vettel, but I think there's probably it's about 50-50, and I do think it depends on where that team's sort of trajectory is. So,
I was going to bring up Stroll, but then I guess it doesn't matter what we think because the powers that be will decide on that, so that's fine. It is an interesting thought to say if suddenly they decide they want to refresh their driver lineup, driver lineup, driver lineup. Who would they grab? I guess they just refresh with someone new. I reckon that's a topic for another day.
Yeah, no, that's a loaded one. Yeah, we'll talk about that one another time, I think.
And I guess I was thinking
what do you think in the comments or at our Twitter, if you're listening
at Twitter.
Who do you think, if Aston wanted, or one of these teams wanted a fresh restart, who could they take? Would they take someone from could Aston even bring someone from inside F1, given how poor their performances have been? Could they lure someone in, or will they try and find someone outside F1? Or I think it's a great.
It's Sergei Sirotkin.
Yeah, he's back. He's back, baby. But let us know who you think. I think that's a very interesting topic that could.
Nice one.
Anyway, go on.
And I was thinking a little about Williams too, I guess. But there's so many factors there. I mean, we recently had news, we talked about it last time, about Latifi apparently getting replaced, but then that was apparently quelled down, and it's almost been replaced by the Daniel talk, but it's not like Latifi's suddenly out there being a star-studded driver, so we're almost just like, look, if it happens, it happens. If something comes out as a rumor, then at this point, we're just waiting to see if it does happen, but we're not going to be surprised if it does happen or not.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens there.
I'll put out my 2 opinions, is that I think Albon will be there next year, and I think Latifi won't. So that's I'll just throw that out.
I think that's the safe bet, to be fair.
So,
anyway. Good call. All right, so we'll talk about a few tiny little things, I guess, with the FIA. I mean, everyone's talked about enough. We talked about enough in our Monaco breakdown. So a few things that came for it. One of the main things that came out of it was Lewis on Instagram basically came out and he was saying that he wasn't happy. The media were kind of using some of his remarks from the weekend to twist him, to almost use him as the driver's scapegoat. Almost like as one of the quote unquote main drivers that are basically fed up with the FIA and saying this and that. He did come out afterwards and say, look, in the moment we're all gonna, basically think things and that, but he understood looking at it later that there was rain and they were cautious and there was safety concerns and yada yada. He understood that, but he essentially said, but I also really wasn't happy that the media was immediately like, oh, if Hamilton's unhappy, then he's still unhappy after Abu Dhabi. And he's like, there's no story here, like,
it's a reach.
Stop this.
It's a reach.
Yep. Interesting on the FIA side, I did want to say as well. I remember, I don't remember where I heard it, but someone made a comment to say it's interesting how, as much as some people may like or dislike Michael Massey, one thing he always did is after the race, he would always stay back and talk to the media and talk through his decision making and where he decided certain things. And so far this year, apparently they haven't had anywhere near that openness after from the FIA. Really? They only get things in formal statements, so they don't get to talk directly with them. So I thought that was interesting from the perspective of, yes, maybe they're trying to, refine things up and more talk, just through, I guess, the ruling and as an official thing rather than letting, the media have at them and then there's back and forth and he said, she said and everything, which I guess is part of some of the fuss with Massey last year, but notably a few of the drivers and teams and especially the media were kind of saying that actually kind of was nice because at least Massey was totally open, and if he kind of, was a bit on the fence or something, he would come out and say it and be open with that, so there wasn't almost this confusion, which I guess we had a bit of that in Monaco, where even after the race, we were kind of like, yeah, but they said this, but that didn't make sense with that, but we're not really going to be able to clarify it, so we just move on, right?
Yeah, it seems like whatever the FIA, obviously, they're trying to make steps to improve their clarity. It shows that they're obviously not there yet. There's still a lot of work to be done on their side. I think even... like the F1 group in general has just come out and said they need the FI, they need to be better. Because it's just a bit they're taking too long to make decisions. They're the ambiguity of decisions is still a bit. It's still kind of there. There's no. It doesn't seem like the conversation again, like you said. There's no real conversations that happen between the FIA and F1 in regards to decisions made and why they did it and how they're going to improve for the future and things like this. But it just seems like there just needs to be better cohesion and better communication to make this better. But it's obviously still not there. And I think Monaco showed us that just the extent of how not there it is. But
yes, and
we'll see.
It's like I don't even think we got a single answer on this whole blue flag thing. And from our point of view, we can see it was almost pretty clear cut. But then you almost it's almost like the FA are like, well, we have reasons we didn't bring it up, so don't worry about it. We're like, oh.
Well, okay, what are the reasons?
Okay,
though?
Yes, yeah. You almost saw like the stewards would say, hey, we're not going to investigate this. So you go, oh, well, then I guess it wasn't an issue. I don't really know why it wasn't an issue. And as we say back then, apparently they had some room to be able to ask that and figure that out. But maybe they're just saying, no, look, we just need to have a full coverall because then, as you say, he said, she said, or someone says it wrong or goes like, I didn't mean that. And then...
but at the same time, I feel like wasn't that the whole, the changing of the rules for this year or the like clarifying of the rules is to try and make it a little more... rather than have all these grey areas or these rules that sort of conflict with each other. Like, wasn't the whole rewriting of that to try and make that a bit more clear, so that way you could communicate it with us and we can be like, okay, we can point to this rule. It's like, this is why we did the thing that we did. And you can be like, okay, that makes sense. But if they can't even do that now, then there is, or if they're choosing not to for whatever reason, there's still some issues.
Yes.
They still need to figure something out because it's, it's just getting a bit frustrating now. So,
yep.
Anyway, we'll see.
And I guess on that topic, I think we heard more of it in Miami, which I think we touched on last podcast or last chatter. Was safety in general still seems to be a little questionable, and yes, the FIA were kind of using safety as a cover blanket for some of the strange proceedings at Monaco, but then it almost seems a case of where one weekend they seem to be not safe enough, and the next weekend they're kind of like, oh no, we're doing everything to be extra safe. It was ironic. I actually saw a clip from Rosberg talking about Baku, and he said it's actually one of the scariest places in terms of where you could have a theoretical accident, because he showed that as you're coming down that front straight, actually, as the pit lane opens up to the left, there's a section of the wall which almost comes at you at an almost like 180 degree kind of angle to you going straight. He said there's a world where you could have a failure, as two drivers did last year in Stroll and Verstappen, and spin into that and almost smack that wall side on at like 300 kilometers an hour. And he was saying how they apparently used to always raise it, but they kind of brushed it off. And I didn't even think about that. So again, it's almost a case of saying, surely if Rosberg's saying it used to come up, it's probably going to come up again. And yet all over Monaco, they were kind of like safety, safety, safety. So it's well, it's all in the same kind of pot here. So we're still, yes, we have Massey gone, and that's fine, I guess, in terms of some people, have relief that he's not the one making shots. But then that's, as we said back then, it's all good if he's well and gone. But is anything actually going to really
change? Yeah. Or is he just a scapegoat? Like I think.
Yes.
I not predicted, but I posed that question back at the I think the Abu Dhabi.
Yeah.
Or one of the videos early on. I'm just like
the myriad videos we put out at that time.
So like whether or not he's just a scapegoat or whether or not they're actually committed to making change. And it just seems like the inconsistencies of the decisions right now. It shows that there are some things they have fixed, there's some things that are a little bit better, but it's nowhere near where it needs to be. And the safety concerns in particular, it's like it's full on safety for some situations, but then brush it off for others. Like for some reason, any sort of weather, like if it's rain, it's like, no safety, have to be safe. Yes. But when it comes to like these barriers without these metal barriers, it's like, just don't hit the barrier. And it's like, well.
And then finally someone does, and they go, we'll change it. And you're like, huh? Well, you're only changing it.
You're reacting rather than being proactive. Yeah.
If you have an accident there and it's pretty bad, but they go, we know it could have been pretty bad, but we accepted that risk, okay. But then it's like they change it when there was an accident. You're like, well, why the bloody hell was a decision made in the first place?
Exactly.
You don't go, let's make the whole track metal, and then we'll walk around and maybe pick a few because we go, that could be nasty. It's like, no, they would pick every single barrier thing they put around the place.
Yep. Yeah.
Extension of Miami and all that. Anyway, we'll see next time we chat. Hopefully we don't have to bring it up for the 50th time.
We will.
Undoubtedly something at Baku will happen. Something at future races will happen.
Almost certainly. It's getting tiring at this point.
It is, unfortunately. But that's all part of the
Formula
fun,
One, baby.
Yep.
It's all fucking politics. Fun.
Anyway. So I guess another smaller point to move on is one of the other things that's been talked about is F1 wanting to move to what they're calling regionalized races in 2023, and that's especially come up in conversation for Monaco, because as of the end of this year, Monaco don't actually have a contract going forward. They've enjoyed what you'd call, I guess, a luxury in the past, so they've been able to have a slightly different weekend where they run on Thursday instead of the Friday, and they allegedly have to pay less fees.
Yep.
And they get some other kind of benefits. They get to use their own camera crew and TV kind of compound and direction, which, I mean, as we saw from last weekend, again, kind of showed that can we not do that anymore because that was garbage for another year in a row.
They're so bad there. It's always Monaco. Just let someone else take control. I think even the Monaco, like the head of the Monaco GP has like basically come out with like them fighting words and basically said they've called out all the other European tracks that have surrendered all these rights to the Formula One and basically said, these tracks are basically, they're giving away all these, and Monaco won't do that. And so it's a real back and forth at the moment. I don't know.
Yep.
Monaco's, I think, on a knife edge for staying on the calendar at the moment.
I think so. Yep. I guess I was going to ask you, do you think it's staying? And if it does stay, I guess it will you'll have to move, right? Because I think they're wanting to do more of a North American stint earlier in the season, because I believe they're saying they're not moving Miami, so they want to do the other tracks around there at that time of year.
Yeah.
So therefore they'll be looking to move Monaco more towards the European leg, if I'm correct.
Yeah, well, it makes sense. I mean, you've got the tracks that you've got at the moment, where we're actually moving into one at the moment where we've got a double header, which is Baku, and then they go straight to Canada, literally for the next weekend.
Yes.
So Canada obviously could be moved to where Miami is. They say, a lot of it comes down to the fact that, Canada's quite cold, so there's certain parts of the year where it's not really feasible to drive there. Like they couldn't.
Yes.
Going there in winter seems like a really terrible idea, given how cold it can be. So
there are plenty of tracks that almost yearly we see snow, so we know that it's not like here in Melbourne where you could race here anytime. It might just be a bit wet or cold. It's a case of some tracks. No, there's a decent chance it's going to snow, and then you're stuffed.
yeah, exactly. So, but there's the idea that Baku could be grouped with your Shanghai's, like your Chinese Grand Prix and your Japanese Grand Prix.
Yes.
Australia, obviously, while it wasn't on the back of a double header, it's still sort of not with everything else as well. Like they come here for Australia and then they go somewhere else. That could
I think it was Imola they went to, right?
It was Imola,
a colossal journey.
Yeah, they went Bahrain,
massive journey.
Bahrain, Saudi, Australia, and then Imola. So it's like it's sort of if they can have that with maybe like your Singapore, or again same with the China,
Singapore and Japan and that, and that's far less distance. Yeah,
that could work. But yeah, like I say, Miami linked with your Canadas and whatnot. And then obviously you got your. I don't know what they're going to do with Vegas now that they've got Vegas as well. That could be an interesting one.
I don't know if they're doing like 3 back-to-backs, if they're kind of doing like as a middle leg thing. But again, they're just trying to, understandably, I guess, they're partly wanting to move to regionalize races, both to help with the general costs of F1 as they have been trying to for a while with travel. And this is part of kind of their sustainability movement as well, so they have less flying around, less moving cargo and crate and people and everything. So it's both a kind of a bit of a double whammy there. Unless you had something else you wanted to mention on that whole calendar thing.
Not really.
The other note that I think you sent me as well.
This was a sort of a relatively new one, but there's it's only a rumor. I haven't seen anything else on this, but there's a rumor that talks have sort of begun to increase the F1 season. At the moment, they've got a cap of 24 races that can happen in an F1 season. But there's rumors talks have begun to increase the cap to 25 races from next year onwards. And it's kind of, it's kind of easy to see why. I don't know if I guess if they're looking to move towards these regionalized races, maybe it makes it a little easier on the teams to be like, okay, we can introduce this extra race, but it doesn't. Yes. It doesn't really affect us because we're doing less travel, or maybe even the same amount of travel. But we're getting an extra race out of it as well, ideally. But at the moment, they currently have, I think, if we take all the tracks that are currently on the calendar plus the ones that are coming in, we already have 25 races. But that's including, your Monacos and the ones that are sort of in doubt. But we've currently got 22 for this year. They're not replacing Russia. That was the other announcement that came out. They're not replacing Russia for this year
at this stage.
So we're not getting the 23, we're only getting the 22. But if we take all the tracks we had this year, and then we're going to China, we're going back to Qatar, and we're going to Las Vegas for next year, that's 25. So if we only have 24 for this year, then at least one of these races is going to disappear. Maybe they're just like, okay, if we have 25, then we can just stick with the 25 that we have, and then work out, obviously they're in talks with getting back to South Africa and potentially the second race in China and things like that. But this gives them, if they can get the 25 races for next year, that gives them at least a little bit of breathing room to be like, okay, we can stay with the 25 that we have for next year, and then for 2024 we can sort of work out which ones are going to be replacing which, and go from there. But I don't know if teams are going to be happy about that, but we'll have to see. It's all rumors right now, but I do think the track talk is going to ramp up, particularly come towards the end of the year. I think we'll probably see a big surprise in potentially some contracts not coming through for certain races that we would expect.
For sure.
So, yeah. That's all I had.
No, that's all good. The element of that, which I was going to link to another point, which is the cost element. We're hearing more and more from a lot of the top teams, basically saying that, look, I don't understand how at the end of the year that we're going to be able to keep up. They're either saying this rate of development, but then also stay under the cost cap, or even just staying as we are under the cost cap. This is you're hearing it less from teams like Haas, who seem happy, even though admittedly they have, a driver that's kind of spending all their money on parts, and yet they've already come out and said it's all faff what the big teams are talking about.
Big surprise, the smaller teams are okay with it, and the bigger teams are not okay with it.
So the point is, yes, we've heard this a lot. It was the small teams that really pushed for this, and I don't even know if they would have gone down this route if it wasn't for F1 almost seeing COVID and kind of going, no, we need to do this, because then otherwise the divide from the small and big teams is going to be so big that half the grid is going to bloody leave, because they're going to go, there's no bloody point being 10 seconds off the pace every lap or whatever, or, being able to snipe all their staff because they can pay them more, etc., etc. So I think I heard similar comments over the weekend that no one's really sure what the penalties are if you breach your cost cap, or what that is. Like when you say, by the way, we're spending 100,000 more on our engine, what's the penalty? And they go,
it could be
disqualified.
So I've got a little bit of information. This is, I think, it was Mattia Binotto came out and he had some comments to say about it, but there's a 5% tolerance over the 140 million cost cap. So 5% over that are called minor breaches, and they can include a range of this is all it says, is it can include a public reprimand, a loss of constructor or driver's points, suspensions from events, or a reduction in aero testing, or a reduction in future cost cap limits. So it could be any one of those things, but they don't specify what breach will get what penalty,
or what specific act. Exactly. I guess if you think about it in real terms, let's say someone has a string of 5 races near the end of the year where they keep getting taken out by other people, and they say, look, we just need extra money for extra parts. They go, okay, maybe there's like a
potentially
you lose some points or something, I don't know, right? But in the case, if they overspend on their development area, where they say, well, no, you're getting less. You're not just getting that time taken from your next year's budget, but even less than that. It's like a bigger than just a slap on the wrist, right? So I imagine, because it's so complicated, and they probably have, they would have had to have figured this out in detail before they proposed it. So you imagine there's something behind the scenes there they're going to do. I was about to say, you'd imagine, because of the amount of backlash that they get on other decisions on penalties and that don't seem to be backed up. But then I'd actually say, well, actually, no, I don't have any faith that whatever they come out with, everyone would be happy with anyway. Especially if it's behind this, especially if it's not public, what those ramifications are and what causes them. You wonder if all the big teams are kind of just constantly pushing on it, even though they're not really on the limit, to try and just get something back, right? I mean, there's a tight development war up top. We've seen a lot of teams bring a lot of developments, and others kind of already start to question each other and go, oh, how is he doing this? And we want to look into the spending on that. But as you say, most of the minor teams are kind of like, hey, we're actually able to spend a bit more than in the past, so this is just normal cost for us.
Yeah, this is awesome. We can see AlphaTauri winning races at the end of the year when Ferrari and Red Bull are they've been suspended for a race because they both breached the cap. But I mean, it's both Christian Horner and Mattia Binotto have come out and said that. I think Christian Horner suggested that teams might have to, I don't know, it seems dramatic, but they might even have to miss races in order to not breach the cap.
Yes, it's a classic Christian drama comment, isn't it?
But also, like, Binotto came out and said, and even if it remains at the current level it is, then teams, like their team in particular, will have no option but to breach it. So, and I trust what Mattia says a little bit more than what Christian says in the media generally. So it does seem that maybe those top teams are going to struggle a little bit with that cost cap. It'll be real interesting to see what happens in those last few races for sure. Yeah. So
again, it's not like these are like still multi-million-dollar companies that have amazing strategists and finance guys and all that, right? It's not like that they've sprung this in the last minute and they're struggling to make it adapt. They signed on this ages ago. They even had an extra year really to focus on the new car, which would have taken all their new budget away. So they've actually been given a much easier course of action with this cost cap than they would have previously. Yep. And yet, they're immediately coming out,
Yeah.
handful of races in and kind of going, hey, we're not going to make it. And you're like, well, you knew about that at the start of the year, so why didn't you raise it when you were... Presumably when they were signing the dotted line on the paper to say we agree, at that point they would have done some sort of, cost model and gone, yeah, okay.
That's the biggest thing is like, every team agreed to this. I think it was a unanimous agreement in the end. All teams agreed to it. You cannot push for an increase now because you already agreed to it. And unless every single team agrees to an increase, which by the sounds of it, they're not going to, then you're shit out of luck. Stay under the cost cap or, breach it and see what happens.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think that's it. But yeah, like I said, if they are being truthful that they might have to breach it, then like I said, it could make for a real intriguing last few races if Red Bull and Ferrari stay as close as they have been.
It's gonna be it's gonna be Abu Dhabi all over again. They'll be tied on the championship, and they'll go, "Oh, you spent over." So for every million spent over, it's
Ferrari
2 points.
gets disqualified from the championship again.
Oh, they just get disqualified. I was even thinking like they lose by a point because they overspent by like $20 on the sheets, and that $20 is worth a point or something.
Yeah.
Oh no!
Some arbitrary amount, and then we're
exactly
back all over again. Oh, don't even joke about that.
No, well, it's fun too. I'll leave the floor open to you if there's anything you wanted to mention. I guess I covered everything that I in my look around this week wanted to cover.
I mean, that pretty much the only other thing. It's more related to I guess the races that we sort of had the last couple. Yep. Obviously, we haven't talked about so much about like the Spanish or Monaco Grand Prix, but I think I'm just wondering if I talked about this in the Monaco breakdown. But I wanted to talk about reliability issues and how we saw them a lot with Red Bull at the start of the season. We were worried that maybe that'll hinder them come this season, but we've now seen it very much swing reliability issues to the Ferrari in terms of the power unit. I should mention. I kind of wanted to pose the question whether or not we think reliability will play a massive part in this championship battle at the back end of the season, or do we think they'll get on top of it? Because obviously we've seen, Red Bull, the first 2 or 3 races, it was pretty obvious to see their power unit had some kind of issue with the fuel. It seems like they've gotten on top of it more recently, but now we've seen the Ferrari power unit mainly in the the minor or the customer teams rather in the Alfa Romeo and the Haas. Both Bottas and Mick got MGU-K failures in Monaco. We had Bottas had a power unit failure in Spain practice. Leclerc had an MGU-H and turbo failure in Spain. Obviously costing him the race. It's a lot of power unit failures in 2 races. I just wonder if that's what's going to decide a championship at the back end, is these power unit failures and the penalties they'll probably have to take for taking new parts. And
that was the point I was going to raise. I wonder if it's less the actual failures themselves, because I mean the comments early on seemed to be that Red Bull, I think it was I think because the AlphaTauri cars very quickly had to switch to the third of some of their parts quite early on, and they were kind of saying, well, that's related to the failures. But then looking at it now, Max was still on the first of most of his parts at Monaco, and Ferrari kind of had to start using some extra parts. It was ironic considering we at the start of the year, I guess related to this, is we were saying how good the Renault looked, and yet already Alonso's on the fourth of some of his parts for that, so that's come around again. It's kind of snuck under the rug.
Yeah.
So I reckon it's probably going to balance out in terms of reliability failures. I think we kind of saw Red Bull have a spiel and then Ferrari have a spiel, but I reckon my coins are in that going forward it might even out a bit more to be more kind of regular and expected across the board rather than any kind of one type of power unit spiking.
Sure.
But I do think everyone will then later in the year, as we saw last year, have to strategically start taking those penalties. And to be honest, I don't actually mind that aspect of the sport because it kind of adds in a whole other dimension when you think about certain tracks like Mexico and that. And do you take something? Do you not? How do you qualify? Do you take it before quali, after qualifying?
Even Hamilton at I know his was
Brazil.
Yeah, Brazil. I know that wasn't like did he take a power unit? I think he did. He took the new one. That's
yes,
because he had the was it the wing thing?
The penalty thing, yeah. So
Yeah,
he took it
so he
anyway,
took it
so they
anyway.
could have a fresh
Yep.
engine
Yeah,
for the rest of
exactly.
the year,
And,
which
you
turned
know-
out to play a pivotal role in it.
Exactly.
And it was saying, whether you argue or not whether that should be an element of the sport is a whole different question, but I don't mind that. So I think looking at this, it seems fairly balanced across the board. So I reckon, I don't think any one team will suddenly fall away than any of the others. I think we've had a really good mix of races so far in terms of low speed, high speed, cold, hot, to kind of figure out everyone's working window. And yes, maybe when the championship heats up, they'll be pushing an extra. We might start seeing burnouts again. That's my opinion anyway. What do you think?
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I don't even know. That's the thing. Like I said, I feel like, I mean, teams have already basically come out and said, and this was, I think, weekends ago, like this is really, really early, and teams are basically already admitting that it's like, yeah, no, we're going to have to take more than 3 of parts. Like,
yes.
You know, it's, again, you saw that again, even last year, you know, some teams are taking 4, 5, sometimes even 6 different parts. Yep. And particularly with the fact that, you know, these power units are a little more with the ethanol that's been added, you know, the fuel mix is a little bit different, it's a little bit more volatile.
Of course, yep.
You know, it's probably, you know, teams are going to have to take more parts. It just stands to reason. I'm sort of on the fence whether or not it's a good thing. Like you say, it is, I think it does make for exciting racing, but I think if it gets to the point where literally every single team and every single driver is having to take you know, new parts for everything because of reliability, I think it kind of becomes a moot point, because like, okay, every team has to do it. Now it's just more about how little of these extra parts and how little penalties you can take,
and it's more luck of the draw whether
exactly,
it actually affects you or not. So
yeah, there's a lot of that. You know, sometimes you can have you know, power units completely destroyed by no fault of your own as well, and you know, I think that's been a point. That's a point that's been raised by drivers since the not even last year. I think the previous year. You know, drivers have been complaining of that. It's like, well, what happens if it's not even our fault? If it's another driver's fault, do we get a reprieve on that? It's like, no, they don't. It's just, that's it. Yeah, there goes a power unit, and now you've stuck with 2 for the rest of the year, or face a penalty. So,
and I guess I was more before. I didn't word it that well. I was adding on also, if. Like, it's worked out kind of favorable in the past that it has kind of made the championship more exciting. But if we go to the final race and you realize someone needs to take a part, so the title favorite one is starting on pole, the other guy's starting in the back, you'd go, well, bloody hell, that just ruined a nice fight, didn't it? So it's almost like it's a bit of luck in how that works. For sure. You almost think whether you have it or not might not change anything. It could, you know, add equal parts, good or bad. It's the same risk either side.
Exactly. So that's kind of my issue with it. But again, you know, then you get races like Brazil, and you see someone like, you know, Hamilton starting at the back and just absolutely romping through the field, particularly in that sprint race. It
both
was
a good show for that, and as we said, then him having the fresh power unit actually could have altered the whole of the rest of the races,
almost adds more strategy into it. Like so, and you know, more strategy is always fun. That's what we look for in Formula One. So
yeah, it's true, and that's what I kind of like. That's what I don't mind about some like quote unquote gimmicky aspects. Like Rallycross has the Joker lap, which I've always liked, and Formula E has their own kind of thing with the attack mode. And even when they had to do the switch cars thing, I didn't mind that, because yes, you're kind of just seeing it of like extra elements for the sake of it. But then it does mean that because often there's no one way to do it, that you just add other things. And yes, it isn't just, you know, car A, car B on track fighting side by side. You know, it adds in other less just strict, you know, burning rubber and gas hard racing kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Well,
that's what we
like. Why don't we just get them all to do drag racing? Because then take out all the corners, then it's just who goes fastest.
Yeah, exactly. But, I mean, that's
just drag races.
That's why we like the tire strategies, when it's like, is it a 2-stop or is it a 3-stop or 1 or 2? You know, if it's
because when you have the one, you almost say there's no point having a 1-stop, just have a no stop. It doesn't make any bloody difference.
Yeah, because everyone pits more or less the same time. You know, and then it's like, okay,
because the deg is never high enough where undercut really matters, because if they're doing a 1-stop, so then you go, oh, it's an undercut, but they're kind of just stopping because they have to use both tires, and there's just some crossover point where they start losing a 1/10 of a second more, and then that's it. It's done by math, it's done. But
that's
when you got 2-3 stop, and like that's what I think was so great about Spain and that strategy. Perfect example there.
Exactly.
So, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, that's all the notes that I had. I don't know if you had anything else, but
No, I think that was what I had.
Yeah, we
I
got
think we're good for now.
Baku, double header of Baku, Canada coming up of two of my favorite tracks, actually. So
should be
gonna be real good. But yeah,
we haven't been to Canada for a while as well, right?
No.
During COVID, they were not having the race. Same as
so
Australia,
it would have been,
so
would have been
a good return.
2019 would have been the last one. So
was that when we had the Vettel fiasco? I think it was.
Oh man, my memory.
That's
not
what I
that
remember
good.
about Canada was the Vettel fiasco. So see if we get some more of that. Canada always throws up something good, whether it's a late race carnage or rain or whatnot. Always so many stories. In every top 10 video you see, Canada
Always
will be in it,
Canada.
regardless of what the topic is. It's on a rookie, Canada's in it.
Yep.
It's on anything, Canada's on it.
Yeah, I love Canada. I'm looking forward to that one in particular. But
yes.
Yeah. No, that's it. That's all I got.
No, all good. So say, if you're on our Spotify, make sure that you hit follow to make sure that our content pops up in your feed. And as we've said before, our podcast episodes do pop up a few days early on Audacity. On Audacity. Sorry.
Audacity.
Wow,
that's a new feature that I don't. Yeah.
Sorry. On it's been a long week. On pop up on Spotify. So make sure you're following. Make sure you're following us on Spotify so you get our content in our feed. Or subscribe if you're on YouTube if you're listening to us there, so you get all the content there. Also, you can check out our Twitter as well, and you can hashtag us there or add us there or whatever you want to get in touch. If you have any other means to get in touch with us, by all means go for it. And any questions you've got, we'll be happy to discuss in any of our future chats that we put together.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, but we'll be back, I guess, after this with our preview of the Baku Grand Prix.
Yep. Yeah, it should be coming out. If you listen on Spotify, it'll be out tomorrow. If you're on... No, not tomorrow. We're recording tomorrow. It'll be out
Yes. Hey, never
Thursday, Friday-ish. So it'll be coming
before
out.
the race.
Coming out in a few days.
Yep.
Like you said, long week. Who knows?
Yes.
Yeah, so recording that one tomorrow. If you're watching on YouTube, it'll be the couple of days after this one. So,
yep.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Yeah, it was a good chat.
Yeah, all good. All right, take care all. Thanks for listening. And,
Thank you very much.
Yeah, catch you around.
Goodbye.